So, Paramount have released this movie that they deemed was too smart for audiences, and I don't think you need to have seen 3 seasons of Rick and Morty to be, intellectually capable of understanding this movie, but it is one of those that I think is better with multiple viewings. It's definitely one of those that's open to interpretations, and for those of you who read the book...
It was an adaptation which was a memory of the book. So instead of going back and rereading it and underlining passages, I did an adaptation from my experience of having read it without going back to the book. And I thought that was a way to be faithful to the thing that I experienced most strongly, which was its dreamlike nature.
That is the dopest way to deal with something. Hey, did you study for the exam? Nah, I read the book, but then I just wrote down whatever I dreamed of. But besides it being different, besides the fact that it's obviously going to spawn a lot of different theories, different interpretations, I think there's a solid through line in this movie. I think there's a solid underlying theme, things that happen if you look closely enough, and I'm going to explain my interpretation of the movie. And of course, like a good CNN reporter, I have some sources. For those who thought this was going to be like female predator and just want to know the alien narrative, the first half of this video is going to cover that, so here's my breakdown. Alex Garland, the director, had mentioned that every time we see an alien in a movie, they always want to conquer. They want to colonize. They always have this ulterior motive to take over the world, and pretty much he's like, yeah, that's because they're all written by humans, and, it's a little thing called projection. But what if there was an alien that wasn't good or bad, right? Like, what if there was an alien that was just an organism that lands on our Earth and just tries to grow? Doesn't have any malicious plans. It's literally just evolving. That's kind of what the shimmer is. When it lands here and it hits the lighthouse with that meteor, it creates this sort of dome effect that they know as the shimmer that keeps expanding and growing. And we know it's alien because it not only just, comes from outside of our planet, but when it appears, the track that's played is literally titled Alien. But this is more of an organism that doesn't land with a spaceship. It's not trying to kill everything in its path. It's just trying to evolve. There are many who believe in the one true God who reigns up in heavens above, but there's also those who believe in evolution. And in evolution, there's this whole idea of cells multiplying and they create a bunch of stuff, and then obviously we get where we are today. But this organism is kind of like reverse engineering that, where instead of multiplying cells, it's kind of combining them all into one. Kind of like the symbolism that you see right at the beginning of the movie, this water glass, where it's refractions that start meshing together. Pretty much what that means is that it's kind of like a survival of the fittest. Everything is just blending together, and whatever can survive it lives. This alligator gets meshed with a bunch of other animals, but it's still around. This Bambi and the clone that it has, it's still okay. Funny enough, it's every human that enters this place that can't handle the rapid refraction evolution that's going on. But here's the thing. I see it as sort of like an experiment in a sense. Like, again, it's just trying to evolve and it's testing out these different things, whatever works, until it figures out a plan. We know that it keeps expanding since it's getting closer to Area X, but it's also learning from everything that enters the shimmer. It's not just combining animals with animals, but it's also combining them with plants. It's combining them with humans. One of the production designers mentions that dude who gets the C-section in the recording, he's pretty much combined with, like, eel-like animals inside of his stomach, and that moment that we see him as wallpaper, it isn't because he exploded, but because he was taking after rock formations that are also meshing with humans, rocks that expand and have layers. What? Pretty much this whole idea of a dome that's combining things, any other director would have just been like focusing on humans like combining with each other, but this man takes it to a whole nother level. Like, imagine if I combined myself with this microphone. I've heard people say that the movie's kind of like random and it does things that don't really add up, it contradicts itself, and I kind of felt the same way the first time that I saw it, but I looked more into it, because I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, and there is massive detail in this movie. For example, every time you see those mutations, they're not just done at random, even the ones in the lighthouse. They actually did it with this thing called the Mandelbrot set, which is a formula that creates these patterns. So everything that you're seeing happens for a reason. Of course, a lot of the mutations that are happening are crazy. It's still a sci-fi, but what it's doing is that it's just causing change. Like, there's the flowers that take after human patterns. I thought it was cool that in the beach you see these crystal trees, which would have been a fusion of sand and the sun's heat that would create glass and cause them to sprout up. To take it even further, this organism isn't just blending physical things. It is literally soaking up the subconscious of anyone who comes in and that's where you get that scream bear thing. Side note, the dude who actually worked on this bear also worked on Paddington, which I think is hilarious. But if you know, Paddington gets its name from this very nice train station over there overseas, where sadly they're not getting this movie in theaters. But they also gave this bear a name. So in case you wanted to know the name of this bear, they named it after the ugliest train station they can think of, and it's called Homerton. But Homerton is not only eating people and physically having their skulls appear on his, but he's mimicking their screams. He's taking the subconscious of its victims, and that's why this bear's going crazy. Even this house right here. This house is Lena's house that we see in the beginning of the movie. And of course, there's like a bunch of metaphors that you can add to that and what it actually means, and I'll cover that in the second half of this video. But it shows you that this being, this organism, can manifest actual memories. So it has a plan. I find it funny because let's say an organism like this actually lands on this planet. The fact that we can't even understand it in this movie, bro, we're dead. Of course, you probably noticed that Lena at a certain point has a bruise, and later on that eventually turns into this tattoo, which we also saw Jane the Virgin had, but also was on that eel soldier dude, and who knows from who else it was refracted from. But what I think is really interesting about the tattoo is what it represents, since it's an Ouroboros. You may have seen it in the film Arrival, but pretty much it's a snake eating itself in an infinity-style pattern, signifying that from death comes life, from destruction comes creation. And that's what this organism is doing. That's why there's a reference to this book that tells the true story of a woman who practically had her cells jacked by doctors without her permission. And while it did end up killing her, pretty much it gave us the solution to, eradicating polio. And in 2018, that ain't a problem. It's following that theme of, sometimes death, self-destruction, it's bad, but sometimes in a crazy way, it can actually spawn good. Of course, there's a lot of theories when it comes to the ending, and for me, it's all about the organism wanting to evolve, right? Like, it can get into the subconscious, so if it can read Kane's character, then I truly believe it has a plan. Because when Kane goes on his expedition, he does end up in the lighthouse. His southern accent that we hear earlier in the movie goes from like a G string to an E string. And for me, that's because it probably got refracted from a buddy. The location is in Florida, so he could have just gotten it from any other southerner. But we see him record himself and say goodbye before blowing himself up. And then a clone appears right after and looks right into the camera. To me, we know that the guy who blows himself up, since he's super scruffy and he's been there for a while, is the original one. And the clone, since he appears right after looking super clean, looking like he just got a deal with the Dollar Shave Club, is the clone since it was literally just created. So if you remember the ending, if you see that the shimmer is still alive, then that's important when you start rewatching the movie. Because what if it sent Kane 2.0 to go retrieve Lena? We know that this thing can teleport, so I'm just assuming that the way that it gets there and surpasses the military is by just appearing there, and that's what Kane says it does. But the moment he gets sick and gets rushed to the hospital, the organism knows all this because it's read their minds. It knows that the military is going to stop them and not only bring back Kane to Area X, but Lena as well. And seeing that the psychologist has been sending in broken people, the organism knows good and well that eventually she's going to go in there. Eventually, she's going to follow practically the same path her husband went through, get to the lighthouse, find the recording that the organism itself left there for her to see, so she can know exactly where the grenades are, so it can mimic what her husband did later. And then it comes face to face with a thing that's trying to mimic and clone her. And then Lena thinks fast enough to do exactly what it wanted it to do, and that's to kill the humanoid by bombing it and then letting it set everything on fire. I think this is genius. I know that a lot of people are always going to be discussing, is the final Lena, the one who's being interviewed, is it a clone or is it the original? And to me, bro, Alex Garland, I see you. You just want people to start discussions. Because at the end, it doesn't matter. If we know that at the end, both of them come together and they still got the shimmer within them, it doesn't matter if it's a clone that's coming out. It doesn't matter if it's the original Lena, because the original Lena already has her DNA completely altered. In my opinion, we know that Kane 2.0 is a clone, and we can see that it doesn't remember everything. The Lena that comes out does. So in my opinion, what I see happening is that the organism kind of used her as an alibi. He allowed her to be released so then she can tell everyone and all the government believes that the shimmer's down, it's dead, it's gone, but really it's living inside of her. Remember that tattoo? This organism has realized that it has to kill itself in order to grow. The shimmer was just part one. Part two is finding a host or hosts that can help reproduce it. We think that Lena's killing it, but in reality, that's what it wanted. It wanted to set itself on fire because its next step is to continue on its DNA through these two who will eventually start helplessly humping each other to that folk song and eventually create a being that's even more Shimmer, that will help it grow and that will help it evolve and perhaps annihilate the human race. Survival of the fittest. But that's just my opinion on when it comes to the alien perspective of it. I still think there's a whole nother half, and that's what the movie really means. I've heard people argue that the movie's about cancer. I've heard people talk about the movie being about cheating, about the environment, and I love how everyone's like arguing with each other. They're quick. You film fans are funny. You're quick to say it's open to interpretations, but the moment that someone gives an interpretation that doesn't go with yours, you call them out and call them a moron. Well, if it is open to interpretation, my interpretation is that you're all wrong. Nah, I actually think this is one of the very few movies where you can have multiple people look at it a different way and it doesn't contradict each other's stuff because
it's a film about self-destruction, and self-destruction could include psychological self-destruction, self-destruction via behavior, human behavior, but it could also include cancer because cancer is one's own body attacking itself effectively. So anything that fitted into self-destruction worked themically.
I think it's an interesting perspective to look at because Alex Garland pretty much says that everyone, whether they're doing good in life, whether they're doing bad, there are people who always find a way to mess themselves up. And every single person can think of that one thing that for whatever reason we screw ourselves over. And if you don't think you have one of those things, if you don't think you have that tendency, there's a conversation that happens earlier on in the movie about whether God's perfect or if God makes mistakes. And I think, that can also spawn a whole nother discussion about creation and that stuff, as we saw with Ex Machina at the ending of that, the ending that happens in the lighthouse if it's, dealing with creation. But what I found interesting is that within that conversation, Lena brings up that our own bodies are like built to self-destruct themselves as we age, as we like end up with dementia and cancer and any types of diseases, right? Pretty much saying that the world is out to get you. Talk to any soccer mom. They're going to tell you that from gluten to high fructose dirt, the whole world is just out to get you. And what's so interesting about the movie is that it's telling you that yourself is also.
Whenever I got to know somebody really well, certainly including myself, I would find they had self-destructive aspects to their character. And some people kind of offer up their self-destructive impulses to you. They make them very easy to see. And other people hide them brilliantly, and you meet them and you think, gosh, you're really together, you're very impressive, and your life is really very sort of well ordered, and you seem to have figured everything out. And then you get to know them better, and as time goes by, you start to see, there's that going on.
I have a whole collection of his thoughts on the themes and self-destruction that I'll have tagged at the end of the video, but knowing that it can be anything, right? Like we have a character who's suffering with suicidal tendencies, the loss of a child, cancer, addictions. This one's a lying, thieving adulterer at heart. Pretty much all of these people are broken vessels. They're damaged goods, that's even brought up in the movie. And if we really want to get the metaphor of this place, you look at the Shimmer and realize that it reflects. And they're pretty much entering this place to reflect upon themselves. They go in there and they try to experience a change, and it either kills them because they can't change their self-destructive behaviors, or they make it far enough in there that they end up facing themselves and either have to destroy it or get consumed.
But that it essentially was each of us sort of going into our own selves, that this whole expedition is sort of investigating and confronting our own self-destruction.
You notice that when Lena first goes into the Shimmer, this metaphor goes into full effect. The first thing we see is her reflecting on her affair. There's a scene even later on in the movie where she pricks herself and she's introspectively looking at herself. She is literally looking inside of herself, and that's when we again get another cut to the affair where she finally realizes that she needed to end it. The whole purpose, the whole metaphor of this place is a self-reflection journey. In my opinion, the main thing that we're seeing in this movie is 1000% about marriage. She cheated, and because of that, her husband decided it was better to do chores in Afghanistan than to be at home. And when he hears about this place that's practically a death trap, he gets screened by the psychologist, who, as we know, is only letting people in who kind of have a self-destruction tendency. She doesn't say that it's a suicide mission, but she practically says that these are the people who are crazy enough to go in. They're crazy enough to go in there because they have nothing to lose. My man knew that the affair was going on and he was broken. Lena, who had something good, took it for granted and she was self-destructing herself. This man who returns isn't the same because of the affair. This whole movie is an artistic, visually, thematically done metaphor to follow a cheater and what she's willing to do to change. It's like she's going on this alien journey where she's mimicking the struggles that her counterpart went through, trying to understand the pain that she gave him, that has her changing when she's in there, that has her evolving and literally coming face to face with herself. I think it's a freaking genius idea because at the end of it, it's just, again, a movie. It's a way to show this journey of someone who's trying to ask for forgiveness, someone who's trying to fight her self-destructive tendency, in this case of being a cheater, of ruining this marriage, showing that at the end, she gets back together with him, but they're not the same. They're not the same because of the act that happened. I think throughout the movie, the whole idea of, cells coming together is a perfect analogy for marriage, where two people are supposed to come together and it's kind of ruined in here. There's the song that keeps getting played over and over again with the lyrics that add to that. But then I saw this interview with Oscar Isaac, who pretty much literally just let it slip what it's about.
And for me, at the heart of the film is this marriage between these two people and the failure of the marriage or the destruction, disintegration of a marriage. And so, apart from the specifics of what might have happened plot-wise between these two, I think at the end what you're seeing is two people that are on the other side of an incredibly traumatic, tragic event and are not the same people they were before. And it's about where do we go now? What do we do now? I know you're not the you that you were, and I'm not the me that I was. And that has a very powerful allegory.
They may be different people after it, but at least at the end, they see eye to eye. And perhaps a spark of what they first had can still live on. Like Garland said though, you're bound to relate to one of the paths. There's the cancer route where she does make it to the lighthouse at the end, and I believe she's a clone since, we see her eyeless, and I believe that she's gone all the way there, and at the end of it gives in. She's done with her fight with cancer. Suicide. She stops fighting and becomes one with the earth as the plants start chia petting out of her scars. Jane the addict goes on this journey, but she gets taken over by paranoia. And sorrow swallows the mother who lost her child, and on that day could never overcome it because she felt she died that day too. Whatever your behavior is, I think the big question the movie poses is, are you willing to overcome it or get consumed by it? We always think that it's these outside forces, aliens, other people, the environment that's out to destroy us, not realizing that many times it's ourselves that's leading us to our own annihilation.
Stand by the stairway, you'll see something certain to tell you.
Thank you guys for checking out this video. As always, I'm curious to know your thoughts. Let me know down below in the comment section. For my Patreon members, for just $1, you guys know you get all those extra bonuses. I have like a whole nother 10 to 15 minute video on all like the sources that I found. So I know a lot of people are going to be like, no, you're wrong about this. I got it all. It's tagged right there if you want to go check it out. If you want to talk about it more, we can talk about it in the discussions. Comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts, your theories, anything else. And other than that, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, or else your self-destructive behaviors will continue.